If you've been playing Counter-Strike Source or any of the Steam games, you probably know that there are usually a lot of servers to select from, and each of these servers is managed by normal people like you and me. Anyone can set up a dedicated server, and people usually think it's very difficult to do so, but in reality, it's not that difficult. It used to be tricky and time consuming until a few years ago, but Steam has made it very easy to set up a dedicated home server now, so as long as you have a computer that is up to the task, you can set up your very own server and manage it like a boss. Some of the advantages in setting up your own dedicated server are: everyone in the server will have high latency if your dedicated machine that's hosting the server is powerful enough. You can host your own tournament and such with your friends, which is sure to have a better performance and very little lag, since the server's location is situated very close to where you're playing the game from. Some people also think you need massive amounts of bandwidth to host a Counter-Strike server, but this is definitely not the case. You can host a small server just for fun or for a couple of friends with just a 6 kilobyte upstream per player slot, but this might vary. However, if you're planning to run a full-on production server for more than 14 people, a normal computer can't handle the task, and everyone on the server will have a hard time during the game because they'll experience lags and other problems. The hardware you need will depend on the size of the server you want to run, and some of the hardware requirements for setting up your server may be memory. When it comes to servers, there's no such thing as having too much memory. Lots of memory is the most dominant factor in how well the server performs under heavy loads. More memory will produce faster response time. Having too little memory will cause delays and pauses that you probably don't want while playing. I would recommend getting a RAM with more than 4 gigs if you want to host a lot of players. Second to memory, you'll also need a powerful CPU. It doesn't matter whether you get an Intel or AMD processor, but in either case, having a dual CPU setup is the best solution, and I would recommend at least a 2.4 GHz CPU for the speed. For the hard disk, try to get the one with the best RPMs, that's rates per minute, but in reality this really depends on your budget. If you can throw money at it, definitely get a high performance hard disk with a large cache size, more than 8 megs. Having faster drives will decrease the loading time it takes for the server to switch maps, so it really comes in handy. There is one last thing I want to say before we get into this though. You don't have to purchase Counter-Strike Source from the Steam store, nor will you actually need a Steam account to host a Counter-Strike Source server. For some games though, it will require you to have a Steam account, but either way you won't need to actually purchase the games to host a dedicated server. You also don't, like I said, you also don't need to have Counter-Strike Source to do this. And now I will show you how to create a dedicated server for Counter-Strike Source. The first thing that you want to make sure is that your server uses a static IP address. This will allow other computers to reliably find your server when connecting to the router. A static IP is important if you plan on having your server run all the time. If you have your IP set up dynamically, it will not necessarily forward the ports on your server. This is very easy to do, so I have a link down below that will explain how to set up a static IP address. But in short, all you would need to do is, if you're on Ubuntu, you would do sudo, or just open this file in any of the editor that you want. Let me just open that up, and over here all you need to do is type this in. If you're on a wireless network, the name of the device really doesn't matter, but if you're on a wireless network you would do WLAN0 inet static address. That's your IP address, so it would be 192.168.0. whatever you want. and we'll come back to this IP address later on, so you probably need to keep this safe so you don't forget. And for the next line, you would do netmask 255.255.255.0 network, which is 192.168.0.0, broadcast, which is 192.168.0.255, and gateway, which is 192.168.0.1. And after this, all you need to do is sudo service network manager restart. I'm not going to do this at this very moment, but that's what you would need to do to really see the changes you've made. Okay, now sometimes, actually, there's one more thing. Sometimes you might have the wireless to send the DHCP address automatically. So in this case, you might have to go to edit connections, which should be over here somewhere. It's on my other screen, but and then go to edit connections, and then go to IPv4 settings on your wireless, and manually edit the file with the same information I showed you earlier with the IP address you want, the netmask, and the gateway. And that's all you need to do. Okay, so the next thing we're going to set up is port forwarding. This is very important because when people try to connect to your server from outside your local network, the router needs to redirect them to your game server, or they'll have trouble connecting. You usually only need to forward the ports if your server is behind a router or behind a firewall. So I'm going to show you, this might vary depending on what, who do you have for your ISP, Internet Service Provider, but for me, I would have to go to a web browser like shown here, and then, type in 192.168.0.1, and for you, sometimes it might be 192.168.1.1. It really depends. You might have to look at your manual, and then just, if you have already set up your username and password with the router, you put that in. If not, all this information, the default username and password should be on your manual, or you can contact your ISP. Once you go there, again, I have Motorola, so this might vary depending on what kind of router you have, but for me, I would have to go to advanced, and then forwarding, and I would have to, this is all made up numbers, by the way, just to show you. So my IP address, internal IP address, this is basically your internal IP address. In this case, my IP address, 192.168.0.100 that I set up. So what you need to do is, let's see, forward the ports 1200 to 1200, and you put in your external IP address over here, and the protocol would be UDP. And you do the same thing, but this time for ports 27,000 to 27,015. This would also be UDP. And the last one is 27,030 to 27,039. And this is TCP. Make sure these are correct when you set up the port forwarding. Okay, let me just log out of here. Okay. So now that all the prerequisites have been met, we can finally begin setting up the server. Usually only getting the prerequisites to work is the hard thing, but once you have this down, it's super easy to do the rest. We're going to create a new user that we're going to be using to set up our very own Counter-Strike server, and you can do this on your regular user account, but it's usually a good idea to have a separate account for this, so you have all of the server-related stuff in one place, and it'll make it so much easier to manage your server later on. So in order to create a new user, you might know this, but I'm just gonna do it anyway. I'm just gonna show you how to do this. So add user, this is Ubuntu. Okay, so I already created another server, but I'm just gonna do this for demo purpose. So I'm going to do sudo add user CSS server 2, and then create your password for the user. Wrong password there. There you go. And for the name, you can do whatever you want. I'm just going to put Counter-Strike source server. Leave that blank by pressing enter. Information correct, yes. And then we have created our server. User account. Sorry. So in order to actually log in, right now I'm logged in as K Pachai. That's my last name. But if you wanted to switch to the user account that we just created without actually logging out, you would do su-css server 2 and put in the password. There, as you can see, it switched my session to CSS server 2. This basically changes the login session's owner without the owner having to first log out of that session. So in short, if you were already logged in with your regular account and were you to execute this command, it will change the login session to reflect that of the user CSS server 2 in this case. So you can pretty much access all the files in the home directory of CSS server 2 and all the permissions that goes along with it. Okay, now as you can see, I have nothing here. I'm going to create a Steam CMD directory. Here, this will create a directory named Steam CMD where we'll be storing the Steam CMD app provided by this Steam. And let's change to that. Change the directory. And for this, I'm going to put this link again below, but what I would do is wget http media.steampower.com/installer steamcmd linux.tar.gz. So what this is doing is it basically downloads the file steamcmd_linux.tar.gz from the location in the internet to your current directory without actually having to go to the internet and downloading it manually. As you can see, it just downloaded that, so I can extract the files using tar xbf. And you can look at the documentation of what these flags do, but I'm not gonna, that's beyond the scope of this tutorial. This will extract the file into the folder in the current directory, so we have all that. So you can remove the tar file, we don't need that anymore. I'm going to remove that. Now, what we're going to have to do is, if you, you can see the steam cmd.sh and steam.sh, those are basically bash scripts, and from what it looks like, they're already executable. But if they're not, what you can do is chmod +x, and then just put in the name of the script, and this will make it executable, so you can actually execute this script. I'm not going to do that since it's already been done for me. Now we're going to execute steamcmd.sh. This is the script file. It's going to execute the bash script, and you can see the contents of this file before you actually execute this script. If you're unsure of what it does, it'll automatically update and enter you into a Steam prompt. Like you can see, you can type help for more information on what are the commands that you can use while on this prompt, like so, and gives you all the commands that you can use, like login, scripts, command line, app build, app update. We're going to be using some of these. So the next thing we want to do is we're going to be downloading the game server files. In our case, it's Counter-Strike source, and to do this you must log in anonymously. Again, I'm not sure why it doesn't let you actually. I mean, for some games they actually do require you to log into your Steam account to download some of the server files, but for this game you have to be logged in as anonymous. So just put in login anonymous, Um,